Welcome, Roster Wars, to our penultimate episode of the United Nations Rookie Summit. We are your hosts. I'm Corbin. We are joined today with Ross and Tyler. How we doing, boys?
Fantastic. We've had a wee break. We're refreshed. We're back. We're ready. Doing two positions group at the same time. So try to squeeze it all in.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Nice
Yeah, we're going to be
to have
doing
all
two.
three of us back.
What's that?
So nice to have all three of us back. Welcome back, Corbin.
Yep, my bad. I totally dropped the ball last week, but you guys filled in admirably for me. So, yep, I missed that one, but I'm back in full force. I'm prepared and I'm ready to have some heated discussions. And we're actually recording two episodes this week. So, this episode we'll be talking about defensive tackles and the defensive backs. Not as many relevant fantasy players in these two position groups. But after this, we're going to go right into running backs. So you're going to want to tune in. Draft is coming up. It's only, 2 weeks away. So it's really starts to time to, tune up on some of these rookies, try to get an idea on who are the prospects you're interested in. And then when we know the landing spots, that's when we're really going to start getting into these rookie drafts here. So, yeah, we'll kick it off with the defensive tackles. We got two guys that we want to talk about, Jerjan, a.k.a. Johnny Newton, and Byron Murphy. And then we've got a couple cornerbacks as well. We've got Kenyon Mitchell, and we've got Cooper DeJean, and then Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. So we'll be talking about five guys today between the defensive tackle and defensive backs class. But Tyler, before we get into it, let's recap some of these DTs and DBs from last year. Who did we take?
So you want me to do all the DBs and DTs all at once? Okay. That was going to be my
Just
question.
do the rankings. Yeah, just do the rankings.
So I don't know what happened to me last year. But so for the DTs, the rankings went as follows. Ross had Carter, Breezy, and Cansey. And Corbin had Carter, Breezy, and Cansey. And I had Carter, Breezy, and Cansey. Those are the three we did. We all had the same order. So, and then.
Did you call him like Brazier last year or something?
No, I started laughing because I thought you called him Brazier.
Oh.
And I'm pretty sure you did if we go back. And then I started laughing because I was like, yeah, I like Braziers.
I'm a funny guy, yeah.
And then for the DBs, in order, Ross had Branch, Witherspoon, Gonzalez, and Porter. And Corbin had Witherspoon, Branch, Gonzalez, and Porter. And I said that they were all very good-looking gentlemen. I have no idea why I didn't do anything with the cornerbacks there.
Yeah, feeling yourself a little that day, huh?
Yeah. So I dropped the ball, but I was right. I mean, they're all very good-looking.
Yeah.
And then going into the sleepers for these guys. For the DT, Ross had Gerard Clark, undrafted, signed by the Chargers, didn't play. Corbin had Keanu Benton, drafted second round by the Steelers.
Ross likes him.
He played 17 games, had 36 total tackles, and 1 sack. And I did not pick anybody.
All ugly.
Yeah, they felt like they were ugly. So, for the DBs, Ross picked Sidney Brown, and Corbin picked Sidney Brown, and I agreed. I didn't back
all three Sidney Brown.
I just have down here. I agreed. So, Sidney Brown was drafted third round by Philly. He played 14 games, 38 tackles, 3 pass defense, and 1 interception. He also took that interception back for a TD. So anybody want to change their order of DTs and DBs?
I think I nailed the DBs anyway. Branch was number 1 for me, Witherspoon, and then the other 2 guys. So fine with that. I think Sidney Brown didn't really. I think they brought in Kevin Byard midway through the season, and then Reed Blankenship took over as well as a full-time guy. So he's still there. He's not popped in year 1, but I'm sure he will in the next few years get an opportunity at some point to do something. So I'm still a bit high on him, but Obviously, my DT's my sleeper. Gerard Clark, not too hot on him anymore. He went undrafted and stuff. It was a late flyer anyway, but I did like Keanu Benton at the time, I remember, and I've just acquired him in the RRRFA as well. So hoping he's good long term. He did have a good rookie year as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Corbin?
Yep, and I mean, we saw some flashes out of Jalen Carter too. We all knew the talent was there. The Eagles' landing spot was ideal for him, absolutely ideal. But you did see him slip in the draft quite a bit just because of the, the personal concerns regarding his character. So, Keanu Benton, I still stand by that sleeper. It was a good pick. I figured I'd just throw Ross a bone and let him have it. I got quite a few D tackles on the roster right now, so he's a little bit redundant there. But yeah, in terms of the defensive backs, Witherspoon over Branch, I mean, both of them had great rookie years. Devin Witherspoon does fit the mold. I think that, I mean, I love Brian Branch. He's electric out of the nickel. And, I think that everything that we said about Witherspoon and Branch in particular, like that physicality translating, like you see that in fantasy football. Now with Christian Gonzalez, before he went out with an injury too, he was playing well, but he's more of that coverage kind of corner. So, and who was the other guy that we were talking about? Gonzalez and Porter. I haven't looked into Porter too much, Joey Porter Jr., but I know he started to get some playing time at the end of the year as well, but I stick by those rankings. I think they're still pretty accurate.
Yeah, I agree. I stay with Carter, Breezy, and Cansey. For the DTs, I still think that the cornerbacks are all very good-looking gentlemen. I will have to say that for your guys' rankings, though, just because of the injury, I would have put Porter ahead of Gonzalez. Mm-hmm. But just because he got injured very early, and it could be a thing,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
Moving on.
Well, let's hop into this year then. We'll start it off with the defensive tackles, and we'll kick it off with Johnny Newton. Is it Jerzon Newton, or do you guys know how to say it?
Jezzy. Mixed Johnny
Jezzy?
and Jerzan. Jezzy. No, I just made that up. I'm joking.
Okay, I was going to say, how the hell are you getting Jezzy out of it? Jerzon. I'm calling him Johnny Newton until I'm corrected. But he's 21 years old, out of Illinois, junior, coming out of college, measured in at 6'1", 304 pounds. Now, he is recovering from a foot injury, so we don't have any testing numbers. No RAS applies to him, but he was the Big Ten Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year last year. He had 52 tackles, 26 solo, 1 forced fumble, and 8 sacks. He's a 4-year player and a solid contributor, even as a freshman. A really versatile piece that I think that a lot of NFL teams will covet. But, the injury is kind of the one thing that, you don't really even see him in all the first round anymore. When mock drafts started to come out, you would see him as, a top 15 player, top 20 for sure. And now you start to see him fall to like the bottom of the first round. And, some mock drafts, you don't even see him in it. And I think a lot of that stems from the foot injury. So what are your thoughts on him, Ross?
Yeah, I love Newton. I've been very high on Newton ever since I first seen him. I think he's got incredible sort of hand technique to win as a pass rusher quickly. So he's very polished already. I know he's been 4 years in college, but he's still very young as well. And normally these pass rushers come out and they're good at rushing the passer, not so much in the run game. I think Newton's maybe the opposite. Not that he's a bad pass rusher, but he's really good in the run game. He uses his hands to sort of shed blocks whenever he needs to. He's very in control at all times. And he's just got so much power as well in his hands to sort of manipulate defenders. He's borderline unblockable, like one-on-one. You need double teams to stop him in the college level anyway. And even then, he could cause disruption at times. He's always got his sort of eyes in the backfield, and he just makes play after play. Obviously, the foot injury is maybe a concern to some teams, but he played through that at the tail end of the season, and I thought that was like his most productive time of the year as well. So he's obviously got a little bit of toughness in there as well to play through things and play productively through injuries. Couple of negatives. Maybe he's not that gap shooting, sort of lightning quick off the snap kind of guy. He does have power, but it's more in the upper half of his body, if that makes any sense. Like he doesn't have like the speed to power move just yet. But I think he's just maybe underrated all round because of that, because he's not your traditional quick off the line of scrimmage, bullying a defender right back into the lap of the quarterback. Like, he's more refined, he's more a polished player, and I think he's got a really high floor, and he's going to be a really good player straight away.
Okay. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I got he's a quick and agile player with he's got the ability to probably move all around the line, and he's a strategic rusher as he uses some good strategies to manipulate his way through the offensive line.
Yep. You said kind of my key piece there, Tyler, and that's his versatility on the line because, I mean, he does project more as like a 3-tech, but he could play as like a big DN too. And, if needed, he could bump down to nose. That's probably not going to be where he's utilized in the NFL. It's not, his strongest suit, but he absolutely can do it. So, you see the 3-down potential. And for me, that just means more snaps, more minutes, and that's going to add up to more fantasy points. So that's really important for me. You want to find a guy who has that 3-down potential. You look at somebody like Kalijah Cansey last year, and we all said that he's more of like that 3rd-down guy. Yeah, maybe he is the best pass rushing defensive tackle in the class, but you're only getting a third of the snaps if you're only playing on 3rd down typically. So, but Ross, I thought that he actually had a pretty good first step off the line of scrimmage. If you're comparing him to like a defensive end, no, probably not. But for a bigger guy, like, he is pretty quick off the line. I think that he does, have those fast, jerky, explosive movements, and he has pretty good pass rushing tools that he uses too. He's not all just power. He does have some finesse to his game, which is nice to see out of, one of those bigger defensive tackle guys. So, and the other thing is too, he has a lot of room to add some mass. So if a team wants to utilize him more on the interior, he's going to be able to add on some pounds, and he'll be able to slide in, play like 3-tech, 1-tech nose, like cover over the guard. So, but I mean, with the Jones fracture, that's the injury that he has to his foot. He is in recovery. That's kind of the biggest concern with him. Not a lot of questions in his game. I mean, if I want to nitpick here, I would say like, I think that he has everything that you want to see in a pass rusher for a defensive tackle, but I do think that he needs to improve against the run because as good as he was in college, when you're going up against some of these massive guards, are you really going to be able to overwhelm an NFL guard with your power like how he was in college? And I just don't know about that. I mean, he's not the biggest guy, so, you do see him get washed down on double teams too, but when he's on an NFL roster, you're going to have, 4 guys just as big as him on the line of scrimmage too. So, I mean, typically you're only really prioritizing double teaming one of those guys. If it's, if he plays with like an Aaron Donald, he's going to be wide open, to do what he needs to do to get to the quarterback, to stop the running back, whatever it is. So I like his game a lot. He was a name that's definitely been on my radar for a couple of months now. And, after actually watching some highlights, some of the tape, you could see how he translates to the NFL. And, that foot injury, not that big of a concern for me. I really don't know why a lot of mock drafts I've seen have had him slipping out of the first round. It doesn't really make sense to me. He's a first round talent in my eyes.
Insane. Yeah, I think it's insane that he's outside the first round. I think he should be top half of the first round. And I think some teams in the mid round or late are going to get a steal because of all the offensive talent is going to push him down, and someone's going to get a really good player. When I said that he's maybe not as quick off the snap, I think what I mean is he doesn't do it often. I think he prefers to stand upright and then use his hands to beat the defender. I think it sort of reminds me of Latu in the way that he rushes the passer in a way. And then when you look at compare him to other guys in his class, so obviously we're going to talk about Byron Murphy, he doesn't play with as much leverage straight off the snap. He doesn't get low and push through defenders. He does it in a different way. And I'm not saying he can't do that. I'm just saying in college he didn't do that because he didn't need to, because he was winning every single snap with his hands. And yeah, he's just really good. Really enjoyed watching him.
And I don't know too much about Illinois' defensive scheme, but sometimes that's what the defensive linemen are asked to do. They're not those gap shooters, go in and stop the running back for a loss. Sometimes they are just there to eat space, fill gaps, and, let the linebackers kind of fill those holes and make the tackle. So I'd have to look into that a little bit more. But, you have seen like certain pass rushing sets where the ball is snapped and he is immediately going and he's rushing right through the guard center, just untouched almost. And, he's in the backfield ready to make a play. It might not always result in a sack, but a hurry. Yeah, absolutely. You see it all the time. So I love Johnny Newton. He's probably, it's a very small defensive tackle class, not very top heavy, but he's right up there for me. All right, let's move on to number 2 here. Byron Murphy, probably the only other defensive tackle who's getting some first-round chatter here, and deservedly so. I mean, he's a great player. Byron Murphy's coming out of Texas, 21 years old, junior coming out, measured in at 6 foot, 297 pounds. We do have a RAS score on him, and it is good, a 9.23 out of 10. He ran a 4.87 40, elite splits, elite explosion, elite agility. He is just a little bit below average in size, but I will mention that all these defensive tackles are kind of lumped together, so you're also in there with the nose tackles too. So he's definitely on the smaller side for a defensive tackle, but you still need a guy like that because he does project as a 3-tech similar to Johnny Newton, and those are just coveted in the NFL here. So last year he had 29 tackles, 13 solo, and 5 sacks, but another guy who has had a lot of production in college. He's played 3 years, and he had 3 years of solid production, even as a freshman. And, another guy who has the versatility to line up all over the line of scrimmage, just like Johnny Newton. I think they're pretty comparable players.
Yeah, I think they're quite different, to be perfectly honest. They play in different ways. Obviously, they're very productive at their position. Maybe the body type's similar, but I think Byron Murphy is just explosive from the snap, like he's shot out of a cannon. He's just very disruptive player that wins with sort of his quickness and his power. And he's got the sort of strength in his lower body as well to sort of stay balanced and not lose ground as well. I think he's at his best when he can use his speed and he can have like a club move or something, and he converts his speed to power really well to just be in the backfield. I think what he needs to improve on is sort of be more of a finisher. So he's obviously very disruptive and he creates a lot of penetration, but I don't think he's always the one to make that tackle or finish off that play. So he had the highest pass rush win rate in the class is 17%. I think Newton was at like 15, and there are a couple of other guys at 15%. But he only had 3 sacks. So that shows me that he's maybe not quite a finisher, and maybe that's just luck that he's not finished some plays. But to me, I think it's something that he needs to be able to work on. I think between him and Newton, it's maybe a pick what you prefer. What does your scheme say? What kind of player do you want to go after? So I can see him maybe going anywhere from 9 to like 27. Like I think he's got quite a wide range, and it just depends on what teams are looking for. They're looking for that guy who's going to shoot the gap really quickly and be in the backfield, or is it a more polished guy, right? Like Newton.
Yeah, like you said, yeah, he's got that amazing first step. Like he's so quick. Very highly IQ player. But yeah, I mean, you guys basically said all the great things about him. There's not a lot of things that I can add to it, except for when somebody says some of his ability reminds him of Aaron Donald. Your ears perk up, and that's what one scout was talking about with his ability to, like his moves and swim move and all that jazz is reminiscent of Aaron Donald. So for that reason, I'm in with Byron Murphy. He gets a thumbs up.
See, I mean, you're always going to have a guy who gets compared to Aaron Donald. I feel like it's every single year, and it's the undersized defensive tackle who's a good pass rusher. That's going to be Aaron Donald. And, I don't really see that as much in his game because he is a phenomenal athlete. I'm not going to take that away from him. But in a lot of ways, I mean, I'll start with a negative here. I mean, I just feel like he relies on his athleticism a little bit too much. And Johnny Newton, on the other hand, relies a lot more on finesse, which I like to see coming out of college now. It is very coachable, to add some pass rush moves to your arsenal, but you didn't really see that as much. He was more of like the speed to power guy and just really relied on that athleticism to get by. And if he doesn't keep on developing, he's not really going to make it in the NFL. Now, I'm not taking anything away from him. Like I said, I think they're very comparable in terms of, size specifically. They're like 6', 6'1", like 300 pounds ish. They're about the same size, but there is some variance to their game. Obviously crazy athlete. I mentioned that, and he already, he just jumps off the screen when you're watching him because he does have that explosive first step. Even against the run, too, for somebody of his size, like he actually anchors down pretty well. So he's a lot tougher to move off his spot than you would think. And, really nice shirt.
Sorry. I was just looking at something.
Yeah. I see that. Well, you should be scared of Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton because they are just two big pigs in the middle there. But lost my train of thought here. He's got a really good motor. He doesn't really give up on plays. You don't see that a lot. And a lot like Johnny Newton, he has the versatility to line up really anywhere. But I think the biggest difference between them is Johnny Newton is more of like a D tackle who can play D end. And I think that Murphy is a little bit more of an in-betweener. Like I'm not going to say he's a DN. Like he's almost like a big DN who can play D tackle, but I do still think he's a defensive tackle. So, I guess Johnny Newton kind of almost veers towards nose, and I would say that Byron Murphy veers almost towards edge in a way, even though they're both really just 3-tech kind of guys. So, like you said, Ross, it kind of depends on what a coach is looking to scheme for his defense. If you want like the undersized, crazy athletic guy with, a lot of potential, then Byron Murphy's probably your flavor. But if you want a guy who's already pretty developed with a lot of finesse to his game, speed and power, then, I think you got to go with Johnny Newton. So how are we ranking these?
I've got Newton 1, Murphy 2. I just prefer Newton. There's not much else to it. I think I've talked about why I like him better. He's a lot more polished, and I think he's got a higher floor. And he's just going to come in and from day one be a better player. In terms of fantasy, I think, like you said, if someone's a 3-down player, then they're more likely to get opportunities for tackles and sacks and things like that. And I think that's what Newton projects more right away as. And I think Murphy will maybe take a bit more time to get to being a 3-down player.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Tyler?
Because I know you're going to go Newton first, I'm going to be different. I'm going to go Murphy and then Newton, just to be different.
I don't know how you knew that I was going to do that, but you are right. I also have Johnny Newton 1 and Byron Murphy 2, but it is very, very close. Like I said, it just depends on what flavor you want. But, like when I'm thinking, like, how am I going to rank these guys? Like, they're so close. And then I just have to snap out of it and think fantasy, specifically fantasy. And Ross, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about how you can get on the field. And I think that Johnny Newton is going to be better suited to stop the run for first and second downs. And he has the tools to be a good pass rusher. Maybe Byron Murphy is the superior pass rusher. He can figure out some moves and add that to his toolkit. But I think that, playing time is really what I am looking for because a lot of these defensive tackles are at best playing like 60% of snaps. So it's just not a lot of time on the field. So you have to maximize every opportunity you get a snap. And I think that Johnny Newton's probably the guy who's going to get a little bit more playing time, especially right out of the gate, than Byron Murphy. Now, let's move on to some sleepers here. You guys got them picked. What are you thinking, Ross? Who's it going to be?
Yeah, I've got a few guys. I'm going to take, he's actually my 3rd ranked DT, so I'm not going too deep. I usually like to go to the 7th round undrafted guys, but I'll go pretty shallow this time. I'm going to go for Michael Hall of Ohio State. Now, he's only 20 years old, but he's played 3 years in college. And I think he's similar to a lot of guys in this class, not the 2 guys we've talked about, but number 2 onwards, where the 2023 season sort of promised a lot and they were projected to be first round picks. I'm thinking about, I maybe won't name a lot of guys, but there was expected to be first round picks, but then they had disappointing production. So in 2022, he had 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. And then in 2023, he had 2 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. So I think people were expecting a lot more from him. But when you actually turn on the tape, I think he was either just unlucky or he needs to improve as a finisher, because when I watch him, I feel like he's always winning his matchup and he's always creating plays. I don't have like any pressure data for Michael Hall, but I bet he's up there, just behind maybe Murphy and Newton in terms of pressure rate, because I see him winning so often. And he's got elite athleticism as well, 9.57 RAS score, and he had great explosion and great speed, and you see that on tape as well. He explodes off the snap, but he uses power. But he's got ability to win with technique as well. Maybe not as often as someone like Newton, but he does flash it. So I think he could become a complete player. He has that ability. I'm not saying he is one right now, and I'm not saying he's going to be. But of all the guys outside of the top two, I think he's got the most ability to be a complete player. And I think he's closer to the top two than a lot of people have him. And he, like I said, he's my defensive tackle 3.
Yeah. I haven't looked into him too much, but, another guy who's kind of, a little bit undersized, like 3-tech kind of projection. But from what I've seen, it's mostly like just pass rushing ability, which is his skill set, but definitely somebody I should look into a little bit more, especially if you like him, Ross. You're usually pretty spot on with it. So what about you, Tyler? Who's your sleeper? Getting organized?
Well, I took Devondre Sweat. Am I allowed to take him?
Yeah, you're permitted. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what else you play other than defensive tackle.
Right, he's a big man. His brother's just Josh Sweat, and he's a really nice guy. But he also was projected second round, but recently got a DUI in Texas. That's what makes him a sleeper now, is because he's probably going to drop down. So I'm wondering, what round does he go? 5th round? Maybe 6th? I don't know. How bad was it? And for a guy that's 363 pounds, how much do you actually have to drink to be over the limit? Like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even heard about the DUI until you said it. Did this just happen in like the last week or so?
Yeah, last couple weeks.
Okay. See, I've been a little bit off the grid being in Arizona, so I definitely have been slacking the last week.
They don't have internet in Arizona.
Huh?
They don't have internet in Arizona.
No, but they do have a lot of booze, and I was drinking that and just enjoying the vibe, so I was kind of offline a little bit. And then we had RFA, so I'm just, keeping up with that. And then I would check to make sure I didn't get on the wall of shame or I didn't have any fines, and that was pretty much the extent of my internet usage.
Don't bring that up. Come on.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Little sour spot for you there, Tyler.
Anyway, Arizona also doesn't have a NHL hockey team anymore, which is fun. Devondre Sweat, who's your guy?
They lost the Coyotes?
Yeah. God, you don't know anything. They're moving to Utah. They're going to be the Utah Soakers.
The Soakers. You're a fucking liar, dude.
They are moving to Utah, but
it's not the Utah Soakers. That would be fucking hilarious. How did you have that just ready to go? You must have heard that somewhere.
Somebody said that. Here's some names for the Utah team.
That is fucking hilarious.
Love that.
Well, Urban Dictionary soaking, if you don't know what that means, it's worth it, I assure you. That's perfect. All right, well, I'll get into my sleeper here. I got Braden Fisk out of Florida State, 24 years old, senior coming out. He's a transfer from Western Michigan University. Another big target for the Detroit Lions, Senior Bowl standout, combine wizard, 6'3", 292 pounds, a little bit undersized, I guess you could say, but he's a crazy athlete, 9.89 RAS score out of 10, ran a 4.78 40, he's got elite splits, elite explosion, and agility, he's got it all, and productive too. Last year he had 43 tackles, 17 solo, and 6 sacks. I think he had like 9 TFLs, and then 12 the year before at Western Michigan. So he really is a do-it-all kind of guy. He has the production, he has the athleticism, he has a great first step off the line of scrimmage, and you really see him attack the ball carrier, whether it's a running back or a quarterback. He just has a really good nose for the ball, high motor kind of guy, never gives up on a play, solid run defender, and he has chops as a pass rusher too. So very well-rounded kind of guy. And to me, when you have a high-effort kind of player who can rush the passer and get to the running back, that just spells playing time for me. You know, he might be a little bit undersized. He might have his shortcomings in some areas, but, you know, overall, I really just love the player. You know, I think that at times, if he doesn't win with that initial first step, he can kind of play from behind. And, you know, that's really how you beat him, is kind of be proactive and get ahead of him. And, you know, some of the bigger, stronger, longer offensive linemen in the NFL could give him trouble. I mean, he only had 1 year at Florida State, but he dominated when he was there. So I really like him a lot. He's been going around, he's kind of been buzzing around like mock drafts, like a second round kind of guy. You know, I'd be surprised if he slips into the third, but a lot of these NFL teams, they crave that 3 tech, and I just see the path to 3 down territory for him. So he's definitely somebody that I would consider in fantasy drafts.
Okay, so
Yeah,
what was
he was completely unblockable in that ACC championship game against Louisville as well. Like, no one could stop him. My comparison for him is he plays like a Beyblade. Do you know what Beyblade is?
Yeah, I know Beyblades. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
So you just let him rip and he goes and he's just all over the place. Like, and he doesn't stop. Like, he just never stops. Like you said, his motor is his best thing. Like, he just runs around until he hits the right guy, I think.
It's funny because
what
I
was
thought
he,
you were,
Braden Smith?
huh?
Braden Fisk.
Braden Fisk out of Florida State.
Fisk. Oh, and what was your guy again, Ross?
Michael Hall out of Ohio State.
Okay.
I was ready for like a player comp and I was bracing myself, and then you just throw out Beyblades there, and that threw me for a fucking loop. But yeah, I can see it. I mean, it's not like super erratic though, you know, like he has a plan. Like I like what I see from him, run game, pass game. Obviously, when you're talking about defensive tackles and when it comes to fantasy, it can be a bit of a crapshoot. But the best thing that I really know to go off of is playing time, and I see a clear path to playing time for that guy. But yeah, that's going to do it for the sleepers and the defensive tackle group. Let's move right on into it and slide on down here to our defensive backs. We'll recap here just to let you know who we're talking about. It's going to be Kenyon Mitchell out of Toledo, Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, and Tyler Nubin, safety from Minnesota. So let's kick it off with Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, cornerback, 22 years old, junior coming out of college, measured in at 6 foot flat, 195 pounds. He is a tremendous athlete. His RAS score was 9.79 out of 10 with a 4.33 40-yard dash. He's got elite splits to go with it, great explosive scores, no agility testing so far. I did not put any stats in here for him. I must have neglected that, but he's really kind of just like that prototypical size measurables kind of guy, like crazy athlete. Like I said, he hits like a safety and covers like a corner, but there's a lot to like about Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, I liked him as well. If there's one position where the 40 time matters, it's at corner. And he's got that 4.3 speed, but he's not a small guy either. He's 195 pounds, 6 foot, so that's a decent size for a corner. And like you said, he plays physically as well. He shows that he's sort of closing speed on tape, and then when he gets to the receiver, he's able to hit them. He's able to pop them at the right time to let the ball get loose, and he's got strong hands as well. So even if he needs to jump up to the catch point to do it, he can do that as well. So he's obviously playing at a lower level competition, and that's maybe a concern for someone who's maybe going to be taken so high, like top 20 in the draft. But I think he's got all the traits you would see. And then obviously he was at the Senior Bowl as well, and I think that's when he became part of a lot of people's consciousness, and then really started to rise up draft boards. I suppose a lot of people began to take notice of him, and he was just dominant there by all accounts as well against some decent receivers. Roman Wilson, I think one-on-one, he had some really good reps against. So yeah, I think he's impressed from the start to finish of the process. And he's got all the traits, and when you watch him, he's dominating the competition. It's just whether he can take that next step up.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a lot of good things to say. He's a ball hawk, elite quickness. He's exceptional with man coverage, pass coverage, or press coverage and zone, and fast as fuck, boy. But I do have that he needs to work on wrapping up bigger RBs in space. When he's trying to use his arms, he needs to wrap them, and he needs to trust his instincts a little bit more. Sometimes he hesitates when the play's right there. But yeah, I like this guy. It's fun. It's cute.
Yeah. No, I like him too. And Ross, you mentioned the Senior Bowl. You know I love my Senior Bowl. And it's really nice because you do have these smaller school guys who get to go out and compete against the guys from Alabama and Michigan and, the bigger schools. And he did not disappoint. I mean, he was probably the best player at the Senior Bowl. You see him with some of that swag, and I like that in my wide receivers. I like that in my cornerbacks. He was not afraid to take on anybody. Line it up. Let's go press man. Let's get physical, and let's just get into it. He did not back down from the challenge at all. So, that's really when he showed up on my radar. I don't think a lot of people realize, Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo is going to be possibly the CB1 in this entire class until he just blew up on the scene at the Senior Bowl. So that's when a lot of these guys step up. He went from like a borderline first round pick to, arguably the best cornerback of this entire draft class. So, he, like Tyler said too, he is kind of, lacking in some instincts. You see it in man coverage a little bit. He doesn't really anticipate routes the way you'd want to. And, but he did dominate the MAC, which is what you need when you have a smaller school prospect. I mean, he was elite. I mean, you look at like Jeff Okudah coming out of Ohio State, he dominated, FBS. He was great. But you see with Quinyon Mitchell, smaller school, he did the same thing. So you need to have that if you're coming from a smaller school, which he did do. So, yeah, I mean, I think that he is a little bit more raw. He has that prototypical size. There are some things to tune up. I thought his tackling was great. Ross, you said it. He hits with a pop. He doesn't just kind of wrap up and bring those guys down. He wants to be physical. I like the attitude that he's got. Now, in terms of translating to fantasy, not so sure. Like he has everything it takes to become one of the top cover corners in this league. But if you're one of the top cover corners in this league, that doesn't mean that you're going to have, a 200-point season fantasy, a 200-point fantasy season. So as much as I like him, I don't know if I'm going to be drafting him just because corners, they're just not quite there in terms of fantasy productive fantasy players, which is unfortunate. It's something that we could look into because there's so much variance year to year. It really just depends on who's more mixed up in the run game. And I could see him on the, a team's wide receiver 1 in a few years, and he might not get any looks. Look at Sauce Gardner. I mean, he was one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and I think he only had like 120, 140 points on the entire season because people just don't throw to him. He doesn't have opportunities to make those tackles because they're thrown to the other side of the field. So that's the one thing about him. I just don't know if he's going to be a very good fantasy contributor, but he is my CB1 in this class in terms of NFL talent. But let's move it on here. We'll talk about Cooper DeJean. Now, this is a guy that I think that we could see some fantasy production out of. He's coming out of Iowa, 21 years old as a cornerback, but, he is a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can use him in a lot of different places. Very versatile kind of player. 21 years old, junior coming out. He measured in at 6 foot flat, 203 pounds, so good size there for a corner. His RAS was a 9.85 out of 10. Very, very elite score there. 4.43 40-yard dash, elite splits, elite explosion. Did not test agility. Now, he broke his fibula back in November, which is why he didn't have any testing numbers at the combine, but he just had his pro day like a week or two ago. So he's back. He's looking good. He sent letters out to every NFL GM. I can't even remember exactly what he said, but just kind of like pointing out like that he's back, he's healthy, he's ready to be drafted. So, I mean, you could see that as a little bit more of a try-hard move, or you can kind of see that as, wow, this guy takes his craft seriously and, he's excited to get back to it. But last year, 2023 had 41 tackles, 26 solo, and 2 interceptions. And I haven't mentioned the 2022 stats for a lot of people, but I'm going to mention it for him because he had 71 tackles, 59 solo in 2022. And I think he had 5 interceptions as well, so a nice high interception rate. A guy who can play corner, safety, nickel. They played him as gunner on punt return. I mean, this is a guy who's going to be on an NFL roster. If it's not as a cornerback, it's going to be somewhere else. So he's a pretty intriguing prospect, certainly.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned these tackles because that's the main thing I see when I see him obviously looking at from a fantasy perspective. Like he's very good in run support for a corner. I think he plays really physically as well. And that just racks up the tackles, and that's what you want I think because of that and because of his skin color, I think people see him as a safety. But I don't see that. Well, I don't see that he can't play his corner. Obviously, teams are quite versatile now, and they'll play him where they want to play him. But I don't see any reason why he can't be an outside corner at the NFL level. I think he's quite a smooth athlete, and obviously his testing backs that up. I don't think he played a lot of press man. It was mostly zone and like soft zone, and I think that's again contributes to why people see him as a safety. But that's just because that's what he was asked to do, and what he was asked to do, he did very well. Like he's got good ball skills as well, and he's able to sort of compete at the catch point. And I think he's got almost everything. I'd obviously like to see him be a bit more in press coverage a lot, and see if he can do that at the next level. But in general, I think he's what he gets asked to do, he does very well. I don't see any reason why he can't be an outside corner. But if he does get moved to maybe slot corner or safety, that's just better for us for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Ross, I don't know what you guys do over in Scotland, but here in North America, we don't bring up race, so it doesn't matter that he's white. Anyway, I have down like he's a white cornerback. What? Just kidding.
He's white.
Yeah, exceptional
White.
and run defense.
It's quite white.
I had down about his fractured fibula, but you covered that. The one thing I did see that they said was kind of a downfall is he's literally so jacked and strong that it makes him it affects his
The hips.
movement, his agility, and his hips. Yeah, that was the one thing I could see, but that as a downfall other than being white.
Well, I can't remember the player that Deion Sanders was talking about, but a couple of years ago he was at the combine and there was a guy who was running through the drills with the cornerbacks and he's like, yeah, he's going to have to move to safety, too stiff of hips. And it actually came true. And so I have kind of taken that away, like if you don't have those loose hips to like turn on the fly and make adjustments. Now he is a crazy good athlete, then you do profile a little bit more as that safety type. Now I don't really agree with you, Ross, that he could be like an outside guy. Like in college he's passable, but I think in the NFL he's best suited at safety, or my favorite spot for him would be nickel corner, because he does have really good instincts. He's got the IQ and coverage. He keeps his eyes on the quarterback, but he has been beaten and exposed on some of those deep balls. But when you're talking about just underneath coverage, like nothing's really getting by him. I mean, he's a great tackler. He tracks his receivers well. If he can keep everything in front of him, I think he's really, really, really good. But I just don't see him really keeping up with some of the fastest, strongest, biggest receivers in the entire NFL. If he can keep them in front of him, I think he's going to be really good. So, I mean, the man coverage thing is a little bit of a concern for me, just being able to keep up with a true X receiver. Like, imagine him on CeeDee Lamb. Like, how do you really think that's going to go? I think there's guys who are better suited on pretty much any NFL roster to handle a guy like a CeeDee Lamb. Now, if you're talking about like a Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, like I do like that matchup for him. I think that's where he's strongest suited, like in the slot, some of those underneath routes. You don't want him defending a guy on a vertical route. Now, as a safety, like I like him a lot in zone. But, if he's asked to come over and follow like the slot or grab a tight end, like maybe not as much. I like him a lot more as like a zone safety or a man cover corner out of the nickel. But in terms of like his traits as athleticism, I think that he's super, super good. And this, could be really a fantasy darling. Probably I'll get out of my way now. Like, I think he's the number one defensive back in this class just because he does have that athleticism. He's going to be, a first, second round pick. And if the team uses him in the correct way, I think you could see a Brian Branch-esque season out of him, even as a rookie. Because he's ready to step in right then and there, barring the injury. I mean, it looks like everything's all checked out with that now. But I really like what I'm seeing, Maybe not the best NFL cornerback, like prospect that we have, but in terms of fantasy, he's right at the top for me.
Cool.
A little peeved about my outside fight back there, Ross?
No, I just think we see things differently. Like I do get these are a slight bit of projection because if you're playing outside in the NFL, you need to be able to play man at some point. You can't just sit in zone all the time. So there is a bit of projection in that. But I just think maybe, I'm not saying you're doing this, but I think people see him as a white cornerback and then sort of have their, it's like when you see a white receiver, a white small slot receiver, and they just pigeonhole him into this thing.
Yeah.
So I think I'm maybe pushing back. Maybe I'm pushing back too much, but I'm just pushing back against the idea that he can't play outside corner. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Quinion Mitchell, or as good as maybe Terry and Arnold's another guy I like, who could also play inside. But I do think he can play outside corner.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not being racist here. I just see him more of as a Harrison Smith and a Jalen Ramsey. That's all I'm saying.
It's interesting. I've seen
color
someone
aside.
compare him to Jalen Ramsey as well, and I was like, I don't even
Really?
see that either. I do
I
not
don't
see that, but
You don't see color.
Yeah. We're in North America. No,
You
I mean,
like
I
Rob.
respect the take for sure. But, I mean, yeah, he could play outside, but I just don't think that's where he's best suited is all. All right. Well, let's move on to our last guy for the defensive backs. We got Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. He's our first and only safety we're going to be talking about today. 22 years old, senior coming out of college, measured in at 6'1", 205 pounds. This is probably the worst RAS score that we have seen out of all the guys we've covered, a 3.72. You know, he's got good size. He ran a 4.5 940 with average splits, below average explosion, and poor agility. Like, if you're going to test that bad, just don't test, dude. I didn't put any stats down for him. I don't know why I neglected this defensive back group, but yeah, I mean, not a lot. It's not a very strong safety class this year, particularly when it comes to fantasy relevant safeties. You know, you want that kind of box safety. You want like a Jamal Adams kind of type guy. Tyler Nubin, I feel like he's more of like a coverage corner, but I do have questions how he's going to hold up against the run. What do you guys think?
yeah, I see your concerns about being a coverage corner because that's what he coverage safety, sorry, because he's an excellent coverage safety. He's an absolute ball hawk and he's got like hands like a wide receiver. For some of his stats, he got 5 interceptions this year, 4 last year. He had 53 tackles as well. So I think he was predominantly played as a deep safety for Minnesota, and I think that's where he was best. His best skill set is, but I don't think he is bad at being a sort of more in the box safety because when he runs downhill fast, and he's a secure tackler as well. He rarely misses tackles. He only had 6 in 2023, and that was the best of the sort of more relevant safeties. The athletic testing shows that he doesn't run downhill fast, but it's slightly worrying because he's such a bad tester. Like his RAS was 3 point something, I think it was. But I'm thinking to myself back to Brian Branch last year, and Branch wasn't as bad a tester as Tyler Nubin, but he did test badly, and I thought to myself, just trust it. He's a smart player. He's going to be good when he gets on the field, and that's the way I see Tyler Nubin as well. I think he's a step ahead of college offenses anyway, because he's always got his eyes on the QB. He knows where it's going. He jumps routes, so I think his athleticism maybe isn't as necessary as some others, and definitely not if he was a cornerback. Because he's a safety, he might get away with it. So I'm talking myself into not looking at the testing. I think the fantasy implications, the fantasy sort of questions, for me, I've stopped looking at the sort of role or trying to project the role that a safety is going to do. I just want a guy who's going to play 100% of the snaps or as close as 100% of the snaps as possible. You look at guys like Jesse Bates or Javon Holland, who in the past have maybe been boxed as deep safety, but turns out they're really good for fantasy. I think there's few players who are play deep so often that they can't be fantasy contributors. I think the NFL is quite versatile these days. So Nubin, although in college played exclusively deep, I think once he gets to the NFL, people are going to want him to do different things to sort of hide coverages, and he may get more opportunities around the line of scrimmage. So for me, maybe if I was equal with 2 players, maybe I'll consider that. But for me, he's the best safety in the class by a distance.
Mm-hmm. No, good points. Good points. What
Sorry,
about you,
I've talked
Tyler?
a lot there.
No, you're good.
2 hours. Sorry, I just got some interference here. So, anywho's, yeah, Tyler Newbin. Yeah, he's more of a safety. I think they have to keep him at safety. Ross said a lot of what I was, seeing and hearing and reading. And one thing that Ross said is that he had sex in 2023, and I'm extremely happy about that because if you go a whole year without having sex, you might be a little high strung, and that would not play well on the field for him. So I'm excited that the young man did have sex. I hope he used protection. He doesn't need kids at his young age, but yeah, he's a good guy. I think he stays at safety. He's a hard hitter, strong tackling. Everything Ross said. He had a slower 40, but he does have pretty good closing speed. So.
Yeah, I saw him blow up in the quarterback's face a couple of times when he had those sacks on the field. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that he is a bad tackler. I don't want to make it seem like that, but I would say that he is primarily a coverage safety. And Ross, you had some really good points just saying, it all just depends on playing time. Because if you're playing, close to 100% of snaps, you're going to have opportunities to get those tackles. You might not be lined up right on the line of scrimmage like a true box safety, or like a nickel, but you are going to have opportunities with playing time, which is kind of the biggest thing that you're looking for. And I can see a path to 100% of snaps for him, just because of his coverage ability. And then, you get the INTs on top of that, that's just sugar on top because you can't really bank on that in terms of fantasy production. You're not going to have a Deron Bland who's getting an interception every game. So not a lot of questions when it comes to coverage. I think he's great, good ball hawk, but it's not that he's a bad tackler, but from what I had seen on him, it was just, taking the wrong angles. And it might not show up on tape as a missed tackle, but it's just kind of football 101. If a guy's bouncing outside, he just gets a little bit too parallel and then he's got the guy beat and then he's playing catch up, So when he does get that angle right, he's more than capable of hitting the guy and not just, wrapping up and taking him down, but he had some hard hits too. But when I look at a guy like Cooper DeJean and I look at Quinyon Mitchell, I mean, they are delivering a pop. And Newbin does that too, but there are times where, he just barely gets the guy down because he doesn't have those angles correct. He isn't able to really just line it up and really put a lick on a guy. So, I mean, I do like the player. I think he's capable of making tackles, and I think he's capable of being a solid fantasy contributor, but definitely more of a coverage-oriented guy than, that traditional box safety, which is what you want in fantasy. All right, let's rank them, Ross. How you lining them up this year?
I don't really like cornerbacks. I don't recognize them as a position, so I'm gonna ignore Quinyon Mitchell. So I'm gonna go Cooper DeJean number 1, Tyler Newbin, and then Quinyon Mitchell. And just for projecting the sort of position they play, because DeJean, I'll be playing slot corner, safety, because I do think, although I'm pushing back on he can play outside corner, I think that's where he's going to play. So I'll project right now, and it will change if he gets drafted to a certain spot. But DeJean, number 1, Newbin 2, and whoever the corner is, Quinyon Mitchell 3.
Okay. What about you, Tyler?
I'm going Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Tyler Newbin.
Quinyon, DeJean, and then Newbin. Huh. Why do you have Mitchell number 1? That's interesting.
I just think he's going to pile up the INTs.
Yeah.
He's a ball hawk.
All right. Well, we're all different, guys.
Like you said before, maybe in fantasy, maybe in a couple of years when teams are like, oh my God, we can't throw that guy's way, then his production drops off. But I'm going to go with the first couple of years when they're testing them to see first.
So I'll support you a little bit on that because my rankings are a little different than both yours. I got Cooper DeJean number 1. Already talked about his versatility. He's exactly what you're looking for a fantasy asset. But then after that, I go Quinyon Mitchell and then Tyler Newbin. Now, I think Tyler Newbin has a higher ceiling, but it all depends on playing time because, first year or two, depending on where he goes, it's very landing spot dependent, I'll add. he might not see the field really at all. And you got Quinyon Mitchell, who could, be the CB1 on a team, if not the CB2 right away. And, for the next 5 years, he's playing almost 100% of snaps. With Tyler Nubin, maybe he has to wait on injury. Maybe he has to wait on somebody to leave in free agency next year or the year after. So there's not as clear of a path for him, not knowing the landing spot to seeing playing time for Tyler Nubin. Now, say Tyler Nubin, if you told me Tyler Nubin and Quinyon Mitchell were guaranteed both starters, I would switch the order. But right now, not knowing where they are, not knowing how much playing time Tyler Nubin is going to get in his rookie year, his sophomore year, I'm going to have to go with a safe bet, and that's Quinyon Mitchell, because I do think that he has a lot of the skills to be an elite cornerback in the NFL. And, he might get tested quite a bit, like say he gives up a pass for 10 yards and they're picking on him all game and he's tackling him as soon as they catch it. That's fantasy points, baby. Like, we're not getting marked down for completions, allowed completions. All that matters is tackles. So as a rookie, or as a second year player, he might have those opportunities where Tyler Nubin might just be sitting on the bench. So that's the only differentiator between those two for me personally.
And Tyler Nubin has a stupid name.
Yeah, Tyler. Fuck Tyler.
Yeah, fuck Tyler's. Idiots.
Well, let's keep it moving, guys. We got some sleepers to discuss here. We'll kick it off with you, Ross. Who's your sleeper this year for the defensive backs?
As much as I hate corners, I need to talk about a corner. I've got a few sleepers, but I'll talk about this guy because I really just love watching him play. Mike Sanistril from Michigan. So he's a undersized slot cornerback. He's 5'9", 182 pounds, but all he does is just make plays, play after play. He stands out when watching all these Michigan guys that we've talked about. He's one that pops off the screen for me. He started as a wide receiver at Michigan for the first 3 years, and then he swapped to defense in 2022. So he's only got 2 years at the position, but it's mental to think because he's so good already. I don't think he's going to be a first round pick because of his role. Like, he is exclusively going to be like a nickel corner. Those are a bit more valuable in today's NFL. I think they're gaining more value because you're always going to have that amount of DBs on the field. But I don't think the NFL is going to catch up and make first round picks into slot cornerbacks. But for fantasy purposes, if I am having to pick a cornerback, it's going to be a slot guy. It's going to be someone like, you look at the top guys year after year, Kenny Moore, Teron Johnson, even Trent McDuffie last year. They're all slot cornerbacks because they're playing closer to the line of scrimmage, closer to the middle of the field to get more opportunities for tackles and pass breakups. So yeah, Mike Sanistril, very good player. Love watching him. I think he's really fun to watch.
Yep. Those are good picks.
And my sleeper is Kool-Aid McKinstry because he's a cool cat with a strong nickname. He's quick as can be, and he's above average in tackling, run defense, coverage, zone, and man. But he can be bullied by big-ass receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Kool-Aid. I mean, he is a very polarizing player. I think that he'll be a solid NFL player, but, not super physical. I mean, he has it, but I like Sanistril. I also like Chris Abrams-Drain and Enos Rakestraw out of Missouri. Those are two other really physical corners, and then Kamari Lassiter too. But I decided to go with a safety. It's going to be Javon Bullard out of Georgia. He is a 21-year-old junior, 5'10", had a RAS score of 8.07, so a little bit smaller of a prospect, but 4.47 40, elite splits, below average explosion, but really good agility. Last year he had 56 tackles, 39 solo, and 2 interceptions. He also had 4 sacks on the field. 4 sacks, Tyler, in 2022, with 2 interceptions to go with it. So what do you think of that? 4 sacks, 2 contraceptions.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Really good instinctual guy. Recognizes plays really well. Very high football IQ, which is something that I'm looking for in these later round kind of guys. Like, because, having that savvy play recognition, seeing routes develop, that's going to help you get on the field. It's going to give you a leg up on some of these younger guys who are a little bit more raw, at least in the short term. But I still think he has a lot of room to develop. He's solid in coverage, but like in smaller zones, like unlike Tyler Nubin, like you're not going to want him to be on an island, your last safety, your last resort. You don't want that. He's more of that box safety type of guy. He's not afraid to mix it up with the blockers, get physical. Really good tackler. He'll run right through that ball carrier. It's not just wrap up and hold on until the guy goes down. Like he is going through that guy. So just a really solid overall football player. I think he's kind of more of like a big nickel in run support. And, that's kind of how Georgia used him too. You don't really want to lean on him for his coverage skills. And, I'm kind of breaking my rule here about wanting playing time because I do see him a little bit more of a situational kind of role, first and second down kind of guy, like short yardage situations. But, I mean, that does still have value, especially when you're talking about defensive backs, and especially when you're talking about a defensive back class that doesn't really have a ton of, blue chip safety prospects. So Tyler Nubin might have more playing time, but to have him develop into a 3-down role, like it's no guarantee. I think Javon Bullard can be used even as a rookie in those first and second down situations, just lined up on the line of scrimmage. You can bring him off the edge to bring pressure on a quarterback. Oh, bless you. Good God. So I like Javon Bullard a lot. I think I could see a path for him, but, maybe not ever going to be, that 3-down, lockdown starting safety. So there's some traits that I really like about his game is all.
Sorry, I was looking at a Snapchat. Who did you took Javon Bullard?
Javon Bullard from Georgia. That's my guy. That's my guy.
Yeah, I just seen a Snapchat they posted of, apparently on Snapchat, Juju Smith-Schuster took a Snapchat of him riding with a girl and his dick out. It was very, very distracting. I was like,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably trying to get out of New England.
Are you okay, man? Because you're talking about like sex on the field. You're talking about Juju's penis. You're talking about good-looking cornerbacks. I mean, I'm a little concerned, Tyler.
I said sex.
Because it's like 3 strikes and you're out, bud. And
I said sex because Ross sounded like he said sex when he said 6.
Oh.
That was the joke.
I thought you meant sax. Okay.
I'm just scrolling through X here, and apparently the breaking news is that Juju did this. Now it's blurred out, so I didn't get to see his dick.
So now you're just doing
the searching for the
he's gonna find the
version.
unblurred version for sure. That's what he's looking at. Sorry guys, I just trying to find this unblurred image. How about Drake though? How about that, Tyler? He's Canadian.
I haven't seen it.
Oh bullshit, you fucking liar! I've seen it.
I haven't seen it. I didn't go looking, and I haven't seen it.
No,
he's getting roasted by rappers now. He needs that. That's all he's got right now. He's getting absolute thunder.
I've seen that kid on Degrassi Junior High, so
there's not a lot to roast after that. Probably fake, but don't worry, Tyler. You don't need to compare yourself to Drake. It's unrealistic expectations. These Hollywood celebrities, they got plastic surgery and fake units. It's all bullshit, man.
So what? So it's like it's enlarged.
Yeah, it's fucking massive.
R.I.P. your search.
All I know is,
yeah.
All I know is he was a fucking cripple in Degrassi Junior High, so fuck him.
Well, he's gonna be crippling women with that. That's what I'll say.
Maybe that's why Rihanna dumped him.
Rihanna never dated Drake.
Yes, she did.
No, she didn't. That's Chris Brown, dude.
Oh my god. Okay, let's get back to football. This isn't the fucking entertainment
tonight. Yeah.
But they dated for a while. Anyway, go on.
All right. Well, we don't really have anything else to talk about with the defensive tackles, defensive backs. We got through all of our sleepers, all of our rankings. We're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to hop into the running backs on a separate episode. So stick around. Maybe we'll drop it right after. Maybe we'll make you wait a week. But regardless, you will have the running backs out soon. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
See ya.